Hello, everyone. I hope everything's going well. I think things are going pretty smoothly so far in our course. Main thing is you got to keep up with those assignments. Make sure you hand them in on time every week because they're going to add up and become your final exam. Remember, because of the assignments, you don't have to take a final exam. And I think that was very generous of me. So make sure that you get them in on time. There'll be one just about every week. Now, today, we're going to have a session on the integumentary system, which is really our first actual human system. Remember that we talked about molecules becoming cell parts and cell parts becoming cells, and cells working together become tissues. And we know about the four tissues: epithelium, connective, muscle, nervous. But now we're going to take those four tissues and put them together to make organs. And the first organ we're going to talk about today is the skin. So I'm going to start my slides. So we'll talk about that for a little while. The skin and the parts of the skin that deal with your hair, your nails, your glands, and your skin, all of those together are your integumentary system. It's your skin, which is really the largest organ in your body. It's actually about 20 square feet in size, but it's not the heaviest, but it's the largest in size. All your hairs, your fingernails and your toenails, and all the glands, those would be like oil glands and tear glands and the glands in your ear that makes the wax. All those kind of glands are part of the integumentary system. What is its job? Well, the integumentary system protects you. It protects you against the sun, because when you go into the sun, you're getting hit by ultraviolet light. And ultraviolet light is very dangerous. Ultraviolet light can give you cancer and sunburn. And so what happens is that if you don't get too much ultraviolet light so it overcomes your skin, you'll get your skin will automatically become darker. And that's tanning. And what that's doing, it's trying to protect your skin from the UV light. Just the darker it gets, the less UV light gets to go through it. It's also protecting you against infection, because bacteria and viruses and things like that have trouble getting right through your skin. They have no problem getting through various parts of your body that like your mouth and your nose and your other areas where there's openings. But your skin itself protects you against disease. You notice that when you get cut and you don't clean it, that's when you get an infection. It also protects you against the drying out. The skin is actually waterproof because it has a chemical in it called keratin, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the structure of the skin later on. But it prevents the water from inside your body from evaporating out too fast. Some does, you sweat and you have some water that actually leaves your body through the skin every day, but that's minimal. You should drink a liter or so of water every day to keep yourself hydrated. But the skin protects you from dehydrating. If you get bad burns, the doctor is worried about dehydration as well as infection, because your skin is not protecting you against those two things anymore. The skin can also excrete waste, and the waste that I mean is inside your sweat. One of the things that's found in your sweat is urea, and urea is the same thing that you have in your urine. In a sense, your sweat glands are little tiny kidneys. They can get rid of some of the urea in your body as well, and that's called excretion, the elimination of waste from your body. Temperature regulation. That means that the skin can control how much blood is actually flowing through it at any one time. If you're very, very warm, the little muscles in your blood vessels in your skin will open up. They call them precapillary sphincters, little sphincter muscles, little circular muscles that open and close blood vessels. They get wide and when you're hot, and letting a lot of blood, probably up to 20, 25, 30% of your blood flowing through your skin at once. And that blood being near the outside of your body will then lose its heat to the outside world, because it's very rare that the outside temperature is higher than 98 degrees, which is your temperature of your body. So it'll tend to lose heat and cool you off. If you're very cold, those little sphincter muscles will close down the artery, the blood vessels in your skin, um, not completely, but mostly, and that will shunt a lot of the blood to flow direct, into the center of your body, away from the outside world, trying to keep the organs warm and so on. So you can control your temperature a bit by having your little sphincter muscles in your skin open and close. If you drink alcohol, those little sphincter muscles relax. And that's why a lot of people who drink a beer or two or something else like that will tend up, have a red face or something like that, because these little sphincter muscles open up. That's why it's not a good idea to drink while you're very cold. You do get that warm feeling because you feel as the sphincter muscles open in your skin, you feel the warm blood flowing through it. But that blood quickly loses its heat to the colder outside air. So if you're very cold or outside, in very cold temperatures, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol because it'll make your temperature actually drop. Sensory perception means that you feel things through your skin. I mean, the sense of touch is mostly in your skin. And so the dermis portion of your skin has nerve endings that can actually detect pressure and pain and various other types of things. Synthesis of vitamin D, that's a very important one. Vitamin D is actually called your sunshine vitamin because your skin actually produces it when it gets hit by some sunshine. Now, the sunshine is again UV light. So you do need a little bit of ultraviolet light hitting your skin to make the vitamin D. You just don't want enough to make you have sunburn or cancer. Vitamin D is necessary for your immune system and even for your attitude. Some people believe that vitamin D is the vitamin that makes you not so miserable, makes you happier and feeling better. That's why a lot of people get, kind of unhappy if they're indoors during the winter. They call it cabin fever because, they're not getting a lot of sun and therefore not making enough vitamin D in their skin. There are vitamin D supplements you can take, obviously, in the drugstore. The vitamin D is an important vitamin for many other things besides just those, but the main thing is the immune system, the attitude, and even things like your feelings about sexual stuff. There's so much that vitamin D does, and you need to have enough of that all the time in your body. Most people in the United States actually, I think, have a deficiency of that. But anyway, that's the thing. And now, if you have an idea about races, we have black people, we got white people. The consensus, among most scientists is that the first humans were black-skinned people because they came from Africa, where there is a lot of sun all year round, no winter really, and they didn't have any clothes on, and so if their body is dark, that means that less UV light's going to be able to get through the skin and cause cancer. So anybody who would be very light-skinned in that situation would be in trouble. So they had to be dark to survive. But as they moved north, you get colder temperatures and you get the need to wear clothes. And so some of your body is going to be covered up. And so what happens is that you need to have lighter skin in order to make enough vitamin D, to get enough UV light penetrating into the layers of the skin that make the UV, the dermis, underneath the epidermis of your skin, so that you would have enough vitamin D. And so it might have something to do with the why that if you look at the situation in the middle of Africa, that people are very dark skinned. If you look at Egypt and Algeria, places like that, they're brown skinned. And if you look at Italy, the bottom southern part of it is darker people than the lighter northern part. Switzerland and Germany, lighter still, and then by the time you get to Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, they are very, very light skinned and blonde hair. And so you have that nice, perfect continuum from dark to light. And, when something is so obvious as that, there should be a reason for it. And part of that reason, white people, basically evolving from dark people, is the synthesis of vitamin D in their skin. If you were very black and living in Scandinavia before there was any drugstores or anything, or hospitals or doctors or anything like that to help you, you would have trouble making enough vitamin D. because you'd have to cover up most of your body from the cold, and your skin being dark, it would not allow sunshine in. So only the very lightest people, the mutations that cause light skin, those are the babies that would survive further north. So maybe there's something to do with the races and had something to do with your skin and vitamin D. Now, when we get to the next slide here, we're talking about the different parts of the skin now. Your skin is made of layers. The top layer is called your epidermis. And right under that is your dermis. Remember, epi means on top of, so epidermis literally means on top of the dermis. And what the epidermis is stratified squamous epithelial tissue with some cuboidal and columnar cells near the bottom of it. The dermis is made of loose and fibrous connective tissue, and so it's much tougher. And the epidermis is connected to the dermis by the basement membrane protein underneath the epidermis. Again, the dermis would be the cardboard under the puzzle. The would be the basement membrane, and the epidermis up top would be the puzzle pieces. Now, the epidermis and the dermis are on top of another layer, and that's called a subcutaneous layer, which actually literally means under the skin, and is sometimes called hypodermis. The subcutaneous layer is made of mostly adipose or fatty tissues, connective tissue. And that's where you store your excess fat, if you eat a little more than you should. And you can gain weight that way too. And also, if you're on a diet, you can feed upon that fat and lose weight. The skin forms the external covering of your body, completely covering it from head to toe. It forms the protective layer between the body and the external environment. The skin consists of two basic layers, as I said, the epidermis and the dermis, and then the subcutaneous underneath it. Now, let's take a look a little bit about the epidermis. Next slide says there's a picture of the skin. Okay. Now, this picture here is a diagram I made of a chunk of skin, and you can see on the very top, it looks like a lot of cells that are all connected together, which is a characteristic of epidermis and epithelium tissue. And then under that is a thicker layer called the dermis, which is mostly looking white in the diagram, but that white stuff is actually a thick jelly made of protein. And underneath that are all those little bubbles. Those are the fat cells or the adipose cells in the subcutaneous layer underneath. Let's take a look at this a little more carefully. If you look at the epidermis on top, you notice that the cells near the bottom of it are not that flat. They're kind of roundish and sometimes even cuboidal or even columnar at the bottom. They are at the very bottom layer where it says D there. The strata are the layers of the epidermis. On D, that's called the stratum germinativum, or sometimes the stratum basale, or base or bottom of the epidermis. Those cells are extremely mitotic. That means that they're doing mitosis very, very quickly to replace cells that come off the skin from the top. You're constantly losing the top layer of your skin into the air around you. That basically causes most of the dust in your house. And so those cells at the bottom are constantly replicating. Letter D strata there on the epidermis, the stratum basale or germinativum, to germinate, so to speak. They're making new cells all the time to replace the ones that fall off your body constantly. That's the bottom layer of your epidermis. Now, embedded in those is darker cells that look like little amoebas, and you can see them in the diagram. They're called melanocytes. Melanocytes are cells that actually make a protein called melanin. And melanin is the chemical or the protein that actually stains the skin a yellowish brown color. The more melanin that the cells make, the melanin will secrete out of the cells and literally stain the skin cells as they move up toward the top. When those cells at the stratum basale are doing mitosis, the new cells actually push the older cells up. And finally, about 14 to 20 days later, they reach the top and fall off and become, again, part of the dust in your house. the melanocytes stay in the skin and make it the color it is. White people, black people, they have about the same number of melanocytes, but the genes in the cells that actually teach the cell how to make that protein, in black people, they're mostly what they call dominant genes. They work. They're making lots and lots of melanin. There might be 10 or 15 genes working all at the same time in any one cell, all of them making melanin. That makes a lot of melanin, and the melanin then would darken the skin very much and become, basically a black person. A white person has just about as many melanocytes, but the genes inside the melanocytes are mutated. In other words, they don't work anymore. So that means that some of the melanin will not be produced, and so the skin will actually be lighter. Again, the more what they call recessive genes or mutated genes that you have in the melanocytes, the lighter your skin will be. Just above the germinativum layer are layers B. Those are called the layers spinosum and granulosum. We're not going to talk too much about those, but they are basically cells that are actually in the process of dying. They're filling up with protein that's going to eventually become keratin. That's going to eventually kill the cells as they move up slowly toward the surface. And by the time they get to the top, again, about 14 to 20 days or so from when they were born at the stratum basale at the bottom, they flatten and they become filled with keratin, and they die. So the skin cells that are actually sloughing off your body right now are dead, and they will again form the dust in your house. And a lot of that dust are actually eaten by little mites that live in your house with you. Every house has them. They're called dust mites. They're harmless, but they're ugly, and they actually eat the skin cells that actually leave your body when you take off your clothes or when you're moving around in bed or whatever. And they're everywhere. You can't get rid of them, even if you vacuum every day. But they're harmless, and luckily they're too small to see, so that means that we don't care about them too much. But they're there. Now that's the epidermis. It's basically stratified squamous epithelium with some cuboidal and columnar cells at the very bottom. The very bottom of that is the stratum basale or germinativum, which actually is doing mitosis or cell replication very quickly and moving the cells up toward the surface. When they get to the surface, they fill with keratin, which is a waterproof protein. That's why your skin is waterproof and protects you from drying out. And that kills the cells. And the cells, when it gets to the top, they flatten up, become squamous cells, and they fall off your body as dust. When you get to underneath the epidermis, you have a layer called a dermis. And the dermis is mostly connective tissue. It's loose connective tissue and fibrous connective tissue combined. It's a combination of those two types. It's very tough, and it's what makes your skin, able to stay on your body and be, when you pull on your skin, it doesn't come off of you. The cells in the dermis are called fibroblasts because they actually produce fibers, and those fibers are going to be leaving the cells and become embedded in that jelly that the dermis is mostly made out of. It's a thick, so almost rubbery jelly, like a really super thick jello. And that's what all the white is in the diagram there. In the lines, the straight lines, that's a protein called collagen. And collagen is the most common protein in your body. Strand for strand, it's probably stronger than steel. So when you have lots and lots of collagen fibers all intertwined and meshed up inside your jelly of your dermis, that makes the dermis very tough and almost impossible to rip, almost like a cotton ball. The other fibers in there are elastin fibers and reticular fibers, and what they do is they give the dermis a little more strength and elasticity. So when you pull on the skin, it boings back to its regular shape. So that's the dermis. Now embedded in there is also blood vessels, because the dermis is connective tissue, and as we said before, last week we said connective tissue has blood vessels and nerves in it, whereas the epithelium above in the epidermis has none. The epidermis does not bleed and it doesn't hurt. You can stick a needle in your epidermis, and as long as you don't get down into your dermis, you won't feel it, and it won't bleed. But once you hit that dermis, the blood vessels and the nerves will come into play, and you'll be able to see some blood and feel the pain. So the dermis has blood vessels and nerves embedded in the matrix between the cells. There's also in the matrix some cells that are part of your immune system and other things like that. But the main one is those fibroblasts. And the fibroblasts produce those very, very strong, tough, tangled up fibers that are inside that dermis that gives it the dermis the strength that it should have to hold your skin together. Now, if you look at the bottom of your epidermis, you'll see some of the cells dive deep into the dermis around the hair shaft and then back up again. Those cells, hair follicle, they're still epithelial cells, and they go down into the dermis and create that sort of vase-shaped structure with the hair inside. There's blood vessels at the bottom of that. That's keeping the cells at the bottom of the hair shaft alive. And what they'll do is mitosis, mitosis, mitosis. And every time new cells are produced at the bottom of the hair shaft, it pushes the hair up a little bit. And that's the hair growing. So the hair is also stratified epithelium. And that's why it doesn't feel pain. That's why it doesn't bleed. But it is growing because the cells at the bottom are producing new cells. The cells at the bottom are doing mitosis and producing new cells to keep the hair growing. As the hair shaft moves up, the cells filled with keratin and dye. They're stained by melanocytes, just like the skin, the upper skin is. It's like the epidermis. So in a way, the hair is just another form of skin, of epidermal skin. Attached to the hair, there's also glands, and those glands are called sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands are the glands that make the oil. The oil is called sebum. And what that is, it just goes onto the hair shaft and coats it with the oil to keep the cells from falling apart and keep the hair a little oily. Notice that if you don't wash your hair very often and kind of get skin oily, that's the sebum that's produced by those sebaceous glands. Every hair in your body has at least one and sometimes more than one sebaceous gland attached to it. Also attached to the hair follicle and to the bottom of the epidermis is that little black line you see there. That's a muscle. And that muscle is called a pilus muscle or a hair muscle. And humans don't use that very much. It's kind of what they call a vestige in evolution, where we have lever stuff from the animals that we evolved from, but we don't use anymore. And that is one of them. And that what happens here is that when that muscle contracts, it causes the hair to move a little bit and to wrinkle up your skin up on top. And so a good example of that for us is basically goosebumps. When you feel cold or something like that, you'll get little goosebumps. So when you feel scared, you might get goosebumps. Those are those little hairs pulling on the hair shaft. They have really no other function in humans. Notice also in the dermis, there are many nerve endings. There's nerve endings for pain, nerve endings for pressure, nerve endings for hot, nerve endings for cold. And so that's where you get most of your sensory perception from. Also, if you look at the left side of the picture there, you see a little wiggly, almost looks like a wiggly wire. That is a sudoriferous gland. Sudoriferous glands are glands. And what they're going to do is they're going to derive from the blood vessels that are also flowing through the dermis. They're going to take some of the salts and some of the urea and some of the water from the blood and move it up a little duct or tube to the surface of your skin. And that's how you get the sweat onto the surface of your skin. And so those are the sweat glands. They're made of epithelium, but they're embedded in the dermis. And then if you go down to the very bottom of the skin there, you see there's all those little bubbly looking things. Those are the adipose cells, which are filled with fat in their vacuoles. And of course, the more you eat and don't use, the more fat you will deposit in those cells, and that layer will get thicker and thicker if you gain weight. So that's the structure of your skin. And the adipose cells also have another function besides being food storage, energy storage in the fat, but they're also there to sort of insulate your body too, because the heat has trouble from your body getting through those. And so it gives you a little insulation. You find some of it around your heart. You find it around your kidneys too, to keep them nice and warm. Okay, now we get to the next slide here. And the next slide is telling us about epithelium. Now, epithelium, oops, I gotta go back. Epithelium has no blood vessels in it, and has a few nerve endings that might, stick up from the dermis underneath, but there's no nerves that actually belong in the epidermis itself. Stratified squamous epithelium is what it's mostly made out of. As I said, some of the cells might be a little cuboidal or columnar near the bottom of it. This is your epidermis layer we're talking about. The very bottom layer is alive and it does much mitosis. That's your stratum basale or stratum germinativum, and that replaces the cells that fall off daily from your skin. They're colored by melanocytes, like we said, and they're gradually pushed up to the surface as they migrate up, and they fill with keratin eventually and die. The top layers are called the stratum corneum because corn in biology means tough. And so those cells are filled with this tough protein called keratin, which is the same protein that's in your hair and the same protein that's in your nails. As you can see how tough it is. These cells are constantly falling off the body. Okay, so those are your epithelium and your epidermis. The dermis, now it should say dermis on the top of the slide here. It doesn't. But the dermis is made of loose and fibrous connective tissues. And so, it has those cells that are far apart and has all that protein goo in between, embedded with all those nice collagen and elastin fibers for strength. But the boundary between the epidermis and the dermis is not a nice straight line. So you get these little ups and downs. And in your tips of your fingers, they're more pronounced. And the tips of your toes, they're more pronounced. And that's what creates the your fingerprints. And so you can see from the diagram where the epidermis and the dermis meet, if there's a depression, then you get a depression on the surface too, and that becomes part of your fingerprint. Everybody has a little different fingerprints because when you are creating your skin, when you're, an embryo, this is all done randomly, where all those ups and downs are. And so everybody does them a little bit differently. And so the fingerprints can be used to identify you. Okay, now we get to hair. Hair is nothing more than epithelium. It's just the same thing as your epidermis in a different form. It's the same kinds of cells. At the very bottom of the hair shaft, there's cells that do mitosis to create new cells, pushing the hair up so it grows. And its function is basically, as I said, to keep you warm, to protect you against, things like things getting into your eyes if you have eyebrows and eyelashes, stuff like that. And under your underarms, it's there to actually absorb some of the chemicals that your glands and your underarms make, and gives off your scent. Everybody has sort of a special scent. We tend to wash it off every day. If you didn't, you would smell it under your underarm pretty quickly. And some people believe that's actually what they call a sex attractant. I don't know if that's true. But they say that some things like pheromones, which are, they attract the opposite sex, come from those glands under your underarm. So if you have the hair there, it actually absorbs some of that like a sponge and makes it actually smell a little bit stronger. The hair, as again, has sebaceous glands, which are the oil glands. It keeps them nice and supple and oily. And sudoriferous or sweat glands are also in your skin, which bring the sweat to the surface of your skin through little ducts. Now, mammary glands and ceruminous glands. Mammary glands and ceruminous glands are both modified sweat glands. That's all they are. They're the same kinds of glands that make the sweat. But when you have a woman who has a baby, pregnancy, she makes a protein called prolactin. It's a hormone that actually changes the structure of the glands in the mammary glands from making sweat to making milk. And so she will be able to feed her baby through those. Men don't do that because they don't get pregnant. So, if you have a baby, that's when you make the prolactin in enough amounts to actually stimulate the mammary glands to produce milk. The ceruminous glands are also modified sweat glands that are found in your ears. And what they do is they produce the wax in your ears to help prevent, foreign particles from getting too far into your ear, to your eardrum, because it's sticky in there. And Both your fingernails and your hairs, they grow by mitosis. Cells at the very base of them just do mitosis, create new cells, pushing the nails out and pushing the hair up. That's how it works. Now, some disorders of the skin, this will probably not be on a quiz, but it would be interesting to show you this. Alopecia is patchy baldness. It's caused by your immune system actually attacking your hair follicles. Bed sores, we know that if you stay in one position on the bed too long, you'll actually wear off your upper layer of skin cells, and that will cause ulcers and pain because of the dermis underneath with the pain. The nerve cells in there and the blood vessels will start to cause issues there, and you could actually get infections and even die from bed sores. If you're unable to move in your bed, the nurses have to move you around and turn you various times so that you don't produce bed sores by rubbing the same part of your body against the sheet every single second. First, second, and third degree burns, that just tells you the higher the degree, the worse the burn is. By the time you get to third degree, it burns basically your whole skin off. Calluses or corns are thickened skin because of constant rubbing. If you have a shoe that doesn't fit right, or you stand on your feet, all day, you can be rubbing those skin parts of your skin against the shoe and various things so much that the skin will react by getting thicker and try to protect itself from the rubbing. Those are calluses, and they're corns if they're on your feet. We know that the skin can have cancer. Carcinomas are cancer cells that form in the epidermis of your skin cells, and the melanomas are cancer cells that form in from the melanocytes of your skin cells. Carcinomas are usually not that bad. They can travel around your body and cause your cancer to spread, but not as much as the melanocytes. If you have a melanoma, that could be much worse. That's why you have to look at things like moles, which have a lot of melanin, and see if they get any darker or if they get bigger or whatever, and you have to worry about that. Dandruff is skin flaking off your scalp, usually because it's too oily, and there is actually a fungus that feeds on that oil that causes this dandruff to happen. Some people who have really bad dandruff actually have to use a shampoo that has a fungicide in it to kill the fungus. Now, the fungus is on everybody and it's perfectly harmless, but if you have too much of it and your hair is too oily, you might actually flake some skin off, and that's basically dandruff, which is not harmful. It could only be basically embarrassing. Eczema is a red, itchy skin caused by your immune system. You get little red patches on your skin. They're not too much, they're not bumpy or anything. It's just very itchy, and it's caused by your immune system actually attacking some of the cells in your dermis. Hives are little welts or bumps on your skin, and they usually are very itchy as well, and they happen because of a reaction to some stimulus. It could be something you ate. It could be emotional stimulus. Things like that can cause them. They usually don't last too long, but if you repeat the stimulus, they'll come back. Moles are just dark patches in your skin with extra melanin. Again, you have to be a little careful of those because they have more melanocytes and they make a lot of melanin. They could be prone to melanomas, that kind of cancer. So you have to watch those moles. And psoriasis are skin cells that multiply faster than they should, causing just raised areas on your skin, and it's also caused by your immune system. So anyway, those are just things that can go wrong with your skin. There's a lot more of them than this, but this is more of a clinical thing. We're not going to have this on a quiz. I just thought it would be fun to show you some of the things that there's some of the disorders that your skin can go through. So anyway, that's the information about the integumentary system. If you need any help, make sure you email me if there's any problems. We'll still do the Wednesday 6 o'clock at night. Anything, if you have any problems or concerns, we can talk about them. But I think things have been going very smoothly. The main thing you have to worry about is getting those things in on time. That would be the quizzes and the assignments. And little by little, they'll be all done, and everything will add up to a good grade, hopefully, at the end. Okay, so we'll see you next time, and I hope you have a nice week. Bye-bye now.